After 6 years of waiting, post-pandemic, after all the roster rumors, all the player commitments, the detractors and the supporters, the dream team conversations, the World Baseball Classic finally returned this year. And on March 21st in the USA, but 22nd in Japan, Samurai Japan became world champions. Congratulations to Samurai Japan. Congratulations to the players, the fans, the country of Japan. And a special congratulations to our guest and my friend today, and the best source of Japanese baseball in English that you can find anywhere on the internet, Yakyu Cosmopolitan. What's up, man? How does it feel to be a world champion?
That's how it feels, man. It feels like Lars Nootbaar's pepper grinder. That's what everyone's been doing throughout the tournament, and it's still continuing today. Wow. The WBC ended a couple weeks ago now, so it is finally starting to calm down a little bit, but wow, like it's still there. Like every time you turn on the TV, they're still playing Trout striking out against Ohtani. It's basically they played Darvish getting that last strikeout in 2009 over and over for like the last 13 years, trying to kind of manifest this into happening again. And that destiny's finally been fulfilled. The narrative kind of is that, Japan reclaimed world champion status. So it feels amazing.
That's incredible, man. Yeah, that's something I want to talk about as well. Like just the symmetry and like the symbolism, I feel like, from the last out of the last time Japan won, with it being Yu Darvish on the mound, to this time with Yu Darvish coming in the 8th, but then his successor after that coming in. But we'll get into that in a little bit. For now, just some housekeeping. My name is Shawn Spradling. This is WBC Central on the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast. Today I kind of just wanted to go over an overview of Samurai Japan. It was an absolutely historic performance. So we'll get into all of it, just like an overview of 2023 Samurai Japan. So feel free to like, share, subscribe on YouTube, on Baseball Isn't Boring's Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And then real quick before we get started, where can people follow you and find your stuff?
Yeah, so I go by Yakyu Cosmopolitan, as everyone hopefully knows. You can find me on Twitter at Yakyu Cosmo, and I have a YouTube. That's where I do most of my MPB coverage for anybody interested in Nippon professional baseball. And then, I do some occasional stuff about international baseball, WBC too. So yeah, Yakyu Cosmopolitan on YouTube.
Yeah, if you have followed me on Twitter for any amount of time, I promise you that Yakyu Cosmopolitan's Twitter account, because I feel like, I've told you this off camera as well, but you have been the go-to source for me for everything Japanese baseball related. I've learned almost everything about Japanese baseball from you. So if you speak English and you want to know about Japanese baseball, definitely go follow him. All his socials, and on YouTube, he has a lot of really in-depth videos on YouTube as well. So real quick, tell us about you, I guess. So what is your background and connection with Japanese baseball?
Yeah, so I'm a Japanese American. I'm half Japanese, born and raised in the US, but visited Japan a lot as a kid. And I've always loved baseball since I was a little kid. So I'm a San Francisco Giants fan, but I've always had this kind of inherent connection to Japanese baseball. And then I was just casually kind of following it throughout my childhood. But then you have the 2017 WBC. And that's when I really started getting into, like, I want to follow MPB as close or even more than I follow MLB. And now, I'm in college. I moved here. I live here. So this is kind of my half side of the family. And so I just love following Japanese baseball. MPB, it's a very different style than MLB. In terms of competition level, not quite there, but it's getting the gap is closing. And I hope the WBC kind of showed people that Japanese baseball and MPB players are really legit. So, I think the gap for a lot of people is that they can't speak the language, and so they just think it's always going to be inaccessible. But there is an interest there. I always get comments about how you can watch MPB and stuff. So I just wanted to try to bridge that gap between people who don't speak Japanese but want to get into Japanese baseball.
Yep. And I think that's where you and I kind of met and
Mhm.
drew that connection on Twitter, because that's my passion too, is just getting people to learn baseball around the world
Yeah.
in countries that you don't speak that language. I don't speak a lick of Japanese, but I want to know so much about Japanese baseball. So yeah, thanks for sharing. Like I said, this is basically just going to be like a tribute to Samurai Japan today, a full overview of their performance throughout the tournament. One thing I wanted to touch on real quick. So the structure is going to be like pre-WBC, everything that happened all the way leading up to the World Baseball Classic, and then during the WBC, and then kind of the aftermath after kind of just what the reaction has been in the World Baseball Classic after the WBC. So something that you mentioned just to start out pre-WBC, I feel like this WBC, this classic, is when the world really realized like what Japanese baseball can be and what they've always been, but what they've grown into, their style of baseball, and just the strength of Japanese baseball. What do you think it is that makes Japanese baseball different from whether it's American baseball or like Latin American baseball?
Yeah, I think there is a different kind of passion there. I mean, American fans are very passionate. Latin American fans are some of the most passionate in the world. But when you see how the whole country came together for this WBC, and I guess the same goes for Korea as well. But it's rare to see a country this big have everyone come together and support one team. And there is kind of a slight country over club kind of, to use like a soccer term, where it doesn't matter if you support a rival team in MPB, you're going to support their player for the WBC. Whereas, maybe that hasn't quite happened yet with American fans in MLB. Like, I have a hard time as a San Francisco Giants fan supporting a Dodgers player. Maybe not the same thing for everyone, but in MPB, in Japan, I think people were really able to come together, and they were able to all buy in, especially when you have the very first press conference, which was January 6th. So, way right after the new year, Hideki Kuriyama, the manager, and Shohei Ohtani together, that really kind of set the tone of like, okay, this is real now. You got Kuriyama, who's, kind of like the Joe Madden of Japan. Everyone knows him. And, he raised Ohtani, he drafted Ohtani, and he flew all the way over to do this press conference. So I just think the intensity is a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that something that's been one of the coolest things for me, learning about all of these different countries that play baseball, and like the cultures around baseball, not only just like the product on the field, but like how fans and families like interact with baseball in their culture, has been so cool to see. Like you said, Korea is has a big, like a rich baseball history as well. But it's been super cool to learn about Japan's history and culture around baseball. So you are on the younger side like me. Do you remember anything from the 2006 and 2009 WBC, back when Japan won it both times?
Yeah, no, I don't personally remember. I have faint memories of like, my mother, because she's Japanese, being like, "Oh, Japan won. You like baseball? That's great." But had no idea about any of the players except like Ichiro and Darvish. 2013, I remember a little bit, and then 2017, like I said, that's when I really got into like, oh my god, the WBC is so cool. I wanna go. And I think the fact that we had that pandemic and missed out on the 2021, that might have played an even bigger role, because it made people wait a whole another 2 years, and just kind of building that enthusiasm. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I don't remember anything from 2006 or 2009, barely a little bit from 2013.
Yeah.
But 2017 was, I think, the big tournament to where a lot of people were turned on to it.
Yeah.
But that being said, with that history, Japan is the most successful team in WBC history, even before the 2023 World Baseball Classic. They're the only team that's won twice, and they've had some absolutely dominant runs. A little bit of a disappointment in 2013 and 2017, but we're able to rebound and take back the crown this year. Because of that success and that history around the Samurai Japan team in the WBC, and just like the love of baseball in Japan, was there kind of a buzz around the WBC even before 2023, like last year and prior?
Yeah, you started to see some articles come out like early 2022 that were like, oh, let's predict what the 2023 team is going to look like. And looking back at those, a lot of them kind of, and I was guilty of this too, but kind of just assumed that Japan would probably go with what they usually do and just kind of pick a kind of veteran heavy roster in terms of MPB stars, and also just try to bring back, guys like Yusei Kikuchi and MLB that have not had much success there, but at least they have kind of that name recognition. But as it got closer to the summer months, and then Kuriyama started recruiting Darvish and Ohtani, he directly went to the U.S. and talked to them face to face. You started to understand like Kuriyama's different. He's not doing things like the other ones. He's really committed to this, and so he got the top superstars from MLB, but he wasn't really interested in getting some of the more middling ones. He just wanted a young roster full of the best young, bright MPB stars, and it worked out.
Yeah, I think it all started for me with once there was roster news out, like once players started saying like, I'm going to play, or like, yeah, I've been asked to play. Because for those that don't know, those Dream Team graphics that I put out on Twitter, Yakyu Cosmopolitan, he helped me fully. Like he basically made the Japanese one for me until I started learning about more players and being able to pick which catcher I wanted, because I know you and I talked about which catcher was better. Takuya Kai, a little bit older, but maybe not as good of a bat. I'm glad that we had some rotation in the WBC. But when we finally got the roster news, kind of, I guess it was like fall last year, there started to be some buzz that this was probably going to be the best Samurai Japan team we've ever seen. I saw you tweet that out. I just comparing to previous WBC teams for Samurai Japan, it looked like the strongest they've ever had, even though they've already won twice. And that was a combination of not only NPB being stronger than it has been maybe ever before. I don't know. That might be something you can talk on. But then also Shohei Ohtani getting to play for the first time ever, and those other MLB guys that were a little bit less, we didn't expect them to play. Lars Nootbaar obviously being the big one. So can you talk about maybe just like what the conversation was around the roster when it was finally released, or at least we started hearing some names about like why this is the greatest team ever?
Yeah, so right off the bat, Ohtani is huge, because he was going to play in the 2017 WBC, got a little injury, and then missed the tournament. Plus, Japan's best player at the time, generational talent, top 10 player of all time, Yuki Yanagita, also got injured. So 2017, there was that energy, but it's like your two best players are missing. So it kind of, killed the enthusiasm a little bit. But 2022, as soon as they find out Ohtani and Darvish are committed, and then, guys like Seiya Suzuki were supposed to play, immediately people are like, wow, this team is real. 2017 only had one MLB player, Nori Aoki. 2013 had 0 MLB players because Ichiro had retired from the national team, and guys like Darvish just didn't want to participate. So 2022 is the first time since 2009 that they had these established major leaguers, which MPB has its own superstars, obviously, and they're very popular, but it just kind of hits different when you have Ohtani coming home after winning an MVP and Rookie of the Year in the US and setting all these records. So immediately you can just tell that 2022 was probably going to be the best team on paper. It was just about, could they put it together? You can't crown them as the best ever without them actually winning it yet. And that was kind of my mindset going into it, was like, position by position, this looks like probably the strongest team ever. You could make a case at basically every position except 2 that they were either equal to a predecessor or better. And as it turns out, they went undefeated. So this is, I think, undoubtedly the best Japanese team ever.
Yeah, I remember seeing your video on that, kind of comparing to older Samurai Japan teams, and it being like, okay, this is probably the most talented, but we have to wait to see if they do anything with it to actually crown them as the greatest.
Yeah.
I think we can officially call it the greatest Samurai Japan team of all time.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I do want to shed some light on is that as good as this Samurai Japan team was, it could have been even better. They were missing Tomoya Mori, who's the number one catcher in Japan. So Japan had basically no plus bats at the catching position. They had Taki Akai, who's a veteran, but he hit below the Mendoza line last year, has no offensive value. Yuhei Nakamura is this okay hitter, but he's not great. Also more of a defensive catcher. And then Takumi Oshiro was brought in as a replacement for Mori. I personally think he's one of the better catchers in Japan, but he didn't have much of a role on the team. So they were missing Mori. They were missing Hayato Sakamoto, who's the best shortstop in NPB history. I kind of compare him to like a Cal Ripken Jr. He's that type of player. He opted out because he has some scandals off the field. So they had, Sosuke Gen is a really solid player, an excellent defender, but he's not the bat that Sakamoto has. He doesn't have the power of Sakamoto. No Yuki Yanagita, who I mentioned earlier, he also opted out. No Kodai Senga, because this was his first year in MLB. So, Masataka Yoshida decided to participate, but Senga said, I can't do it. Or maybe the Mets told him he's not allowed to. They had no Kai Mataira, who is a top 2 or 3 reliever in Japan last year. He's converting to a starter this year, so he decided to opt out. No Roji Kuribayashi, the best closer in Japan. He was on the team but got injured, so played in 0 games. And then, of course, no Seiya Suzuki. He was also supposed to play but got hurt. So they were missing like 6 or 7 top guys that could have been on the team, and they still went undefeated.
It is ridiculous. Seiya Suzuki was supposed to be the 3-hole. Yuki Yanagita is one of the best players in NPB history, from what I understand. You got, like you said, the best shortstop. It's pretty incredible to think about this being the greatest Samurai Japan team that we've ever seen, and yet they were missing a lot of those top names. So you and I mentioned this offline as well, but of course there's a lot of players that USA was missing. A lot of pitchers. For the most part, the bats were there. Those were all the top bats that you can get in the USA. But pitching is always going to be an issue. Hopefully it's less of an issue in 2026, but that doesn't mean that Japan wasn't also missing some of their top players. So that was really cool to see. The fact that they were still able to go undefeated, and with a lot of those players that weren't able to join, we got to see maybe an inclusion because of that of everybody's favorite Lars Nootbaar, and how he just took the world by storm. How did that go about? Like, how did that start, the craze over Lars Nootbaar?
Yeah, so Lars Nootbaar, I mean, he might be the most beloved player in Japan now, other than Ohtani. When he first got, there were rumors about him, in the summer, and then you were reporting on it about how him and Stephen Kwan were, Japan were trying to get them. Manager Kuriyama said in an interview right after the WBC that he really wanted both Kwan and Nootbaar, but Kwan wasn't eligible. So when Nootbaar was first announced that, okay, he is going to be on the team, a lot of Japanese fans, more casual fans, were thinking, I don't even know who this guy is. You look at his stats, OPS is good, but he hit 228 last year, only 2 years in MLB. People are thinking, why did they choose this guy? Japan has some quality outfielders. Granted, they don't really have much power, and that's what Kuriyama really was going for in picking Nootbaar. He wanted a center fielder that can give a plus bat. He can play great defense, and he's a great personality. That's another thing that a lot of people were quickly realizing, is that Nootbaar is a great clubhouse presence, just brings the energy. Obviously, he does that in St. Louis, and him and Ohtani joined the team on the same day, March 3rd, I believe. They were in Nagoya. They were playing exhibition games against the Chunichi Dragons, and they finally show up. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, this was kind of like it's really finally happening moment. Like, Ohtani's here, Nootbaar's here. And immediately they try to get him into the team, make him feel included. Kotaka Yamakawa makes shirts. They come up with a nickname for him, Tachan, because his Japanese name is Tatsuji. So even though Nootbaar barely speaks Japanese, he was, being included in the team. He first appeared in one of these practice warm-up games in Osaka a few days later, got a hit in his first at-bat. And then it was when the WBC started, though, and he's showing all this energy. He's doing the pepper grinder. He's getting clutch hits. The most memorable one, I think, is against Korea when he, shot a single right through his teammate Tommy Edman. That was huge. I think it was early in the game. And then later he had a diving catch, just showing, how all in he was. That really, caught the hearts of a lot of people, seeing, this guy's supposedly, according to some people who don't like him, he's like, oh, he's not even Japanese, blah, blah, blah. But he's showing so much passion for Japan. And he clearly wants to play for Japan. And he's been saying this since he was a little kid. And so for people who are half like me, it was also just beautiful to see, kind of like people who are half are usually, there is a slight kind of stereotype there. And so he was feeling included. People were starting to take him in. Like I said, he made that great diving catch. And then right at the end of that game, he had this interview where he got the hero interview. So he's player of the game kind of. And then he says, Nippon daisuki saiko, which is like, I love Japan, let's go. So it was just awesome.
Oh, I love that so much. I think one of my favorite scenes from the WBC, just the entire tournament of any team, was seeing him do like the pregame speech, like that hype up speech that they do before every game. Obviously Ohtani's before the final was just chilled my bones, but for him, seeing him do it through an interpreter was so much fun. It was just really cool to see like the team revolve, like kind of surround him and embrace him, and not only hit like the team, but the fans, because there was I think a little time, maybe a couple weeks or a few months even, that there was a little bit of speculation if he would be accepted, if someone like him or Kwon was going to be fully accepted to the team, because as you mentioned, this is the first time in Samurai Japan history that they've had half Japanese player or a player born outside of Japan be on the team. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was 3 half Japanese players on the team.
Yeah, so you had Darvish, who's been there for a while, and he had the stereotype. He had kind of the slight, discrimination towards the beginning, but he's so established now that it's like, oh, we accept him now. But with Nootbaar, we had no idea, and then this actually can transition well to Yuki Utagawa, who's another young Hafu. He's half Filipino player. There was an article about him just days after the Miyazaki camp began in February that he doesn't feel included on the team. He does have a few Oryx Buffaloes teammates there, but he just, he feels left out when you have so many superstars around him, and he just made his debut last summer. So he was having a tough time kind of getting to know the guys. And then Darvish sees that article immediately that night. They all go out for dinner, the pitchers, and they take a picture with Utagawa in the middle of it to make him feel included. And, this might be a little speculation, but I think maybe Darvish sees a little bit of himself in Utagawa because they're both Hafu, and Darvish might have been in his shoes when he first came into the league, because, Darvish was kind of he admits this himself on his channel. He had a bit of an ego when he came into the league, and a lot of his teammates didn't want to talk to him. So he's really kind of mellowed out over the years, and now, everyone kind of treats him like the team dad. So it comes full circle.
Yeah. No, that was super cool to see. I know for you had talked about it, and I'm sure for a lot of other Hafu half Japanese fans, this was probably a pretty special WBC. So I'm glad to see them kind of embrace those 3 players. So yeah, there was clearly a lot of hype leading up to the WBC. We could talk about the pre-WBC forever. We could talk about all of this for hours, but the last, I guess, 1 or 2 things before we jump into the actual pool play. 2 things. 1, viewership numbers of the exhibition games. It's ridiculous. Like the WBC hadn't even started yet, but I mean, Japan had fallen in love with this team so much, and they love baseball and they love Shohei Ohtani, that even in these like exhibition games before the WBC started, there was unbelievable crowds all in the Tokyo Dome and the surrounding area, it seemed like.
Yeah, absolutely. You had crowds lined up for hours and hours, thousands of people just trying to get their hands on merch, but everything was selling out so quick.
Did you get anything?
Like Miyazaki. Oh, I did not get anything. Nope. I got to wait till like summer to for them to get back in stock, but I tried. In the Miyazaki camp, they had like a couple thousand people in the stands. They had tens of thousands watching on the live stream. They had hundreds of thousands watching the replay. When they played their exhibition games in Kobe, they had, or Osaka rather, they had their when Ohtani hit his home run from one knee, and then he hit a home run right after that. So that was kind of iconic. Those games were watched by like 36% of the population for households. Those were the TV viewership numbers, and we thought that was like insane. But then obviously they broke that even more in the actual WBC. So the viewership numbers were pretty insane. They set a whole bunch of records. And I'm not surprised, because when you have Ohtani, when you have all the best stars from MLB and NPB, people are going to be interested.
It was so much fun to watch. Last thing before we talk about pool play, the pitching rotation plan. There were a couple different options that we thought could play out, but then we realized, okay, Ohtani's probably going to pitch this first game, then Darvish, even though you could call any of those four pitchers the ace of the rotation. All of them are ridiculous. But clearly, I mean, this was the best pitching rotation of any team. What did you think about the plan to like implement that pitching rotation?
Yeah, so initially I was a little skeptical about having Ohtani start against China, because I think most people kind of were like, you're kind of wasting his start against the team that you're probably going to beat no matter who you pitch. But Kuriyama kind of put it best when he was like, the WBC starts with Ohtani. And obviously it ends up coming full circle because he closes the WBC. So it starts and ends with Ohtani. But it's kind of a symbolic start where you're getting people back into the swing of things. Here we are. This is the WBC. Let's have Ohtani start it. Darvish, who didn't look great coming into the tournament because of his MLB contract restrictions, wasn't allowed to play in an official exhibition game. So he wasn't sharp. They pitched him against Korea. That probably wasn't the best choice, even though he has a ton of experience against past Korean teams. And he didn't do very well in his start. Roki Sasaki on 3/11, the anniversary of the Tohoku earthquake that killed his father and grandparents, that, as Kuriyama says, was like, it's not him making that decision. It was always going to be Sasaki. It just was like the stars aligning. It was destiny for Sasaki to pitch in this game, in the memory of his father and his grandparents. Just absolutely amazing kind of story there. And then Yamamoto versus Australia. Yamamoto's probably, arguably, the best pitcher in Japan right now, but he's the 4-starter. And they had this kind of plan where they were this goes back to the exhibition games. They were just kind of going to piggyback, right? Because of the pitch count limits. So they got to use all of their, for Japan, they had kind of this term like, oh, you're the first starter and then you're the second starter. So the second starter comes in after the pitch counts up, and then he throws innings like 4 through 6, just piggybacking. And then they go to the relievers after that. So I think the plan overall was not, there were some areas where you could have maybe improved on it, but overall, I mean, they won all their games, so you can't really dispute it.
Yeah, I was a little bit skeptical when they started Ohtani the first game, when Kuriyama said he'd go first, but it made sense with wanting to start the tournament with him. But the thing I didn't realize was that he'd be available to pitch in the last game. When they said he was starting against China, I thought they were just going to pitch him 2 games and not have him on the mound anything after that, because from the Angels, it sounded like they didn't want him pitching at all so that he could prepare for opening day. Yeah. But later we learned that they had accounted for 1 inning, which became the most legendary inning of like baseball history, honestly. So it was super cool. As much as we may have doubted or nitpicked, Kuriyama knew what he was doing. So exactly. It was awesome. So we'll move into the actual WBC. We can start with pool play. There's so many things we could talk about, but I'll go ahead and go over the 4 games. And if there's anything in particular, like any moments you want to talk about, feel free to talk about them. But first game, China, Shohei Ohtani started, won 8-1. Second game, Korea, 13-4, Japan's biggest rival. Czech Republic for the third game, 10-2, Japan won. Australia, fourth game, 7-1. So none of those games were even close. But what were some of your favorite moments from pool play? What do you remember being like the biggest moments or storylines from then?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just name like one thing from every game, I guess. The China game, they didn't play that well. I mean, it was like 4-1 late, which is kind of unbelievable when you think of the talent gap between Japan and China.
Yeah.
So really great job by China, honestly. Samurai Blues manager for the World Cup soccer team, Moriyasu, he threw out the first pitch, so that was also a nice kind of passing of the torch. But yeah, the China game overall, I don't think it was that great for Japan, but they won. The second game, I think one of the biggest moments was that Genda fractured his finger sliding into second base in the third inning. He ran back into the dugout. This is what Kuriyama was telling us afterwards. Just swallowed a bunch of painkillers and then ran right back on the field without even like daring to listen to Kuriyama saying, you can't play anymore. He wasn't going to hear it. He was going to play no matter what. Eventually, they were able to force him to sit the next two games, but he kept saying like, I have the samurai spirit, whatever. I can't sit. I have to play these games, even if my finger's broken. And it was like snapped off too. It was like kind of ugly.
Ridiculous.
And yeah, just ridiculous. But yeah, they win that game big. It was kind of close in the beginning. Kind of, Korea took the lead early with that Young home run against Darvish.
Yeah.
But then they came back in the third inning. Kondo had a big double to center. That Nootbaar one we mentioned earlier. Yoshida also had a few hits. Nootbaar had that catch in the fifth inning. That was excellent. And then they kind of just took the momentum after that in the middle and late innings. My favorite moment from the Czech game, I would say, was when Roki Sasaki hit Willie Escala in the knee on 100 miles per hour. And it looked like, man, that looked bad. And Escala was down, but it kind of really showed you the human element of the game because Escala gets up, he's running down to first base, and he gets a standing ovation from 45,000. Hotaka Yamakawa, the first baseman's kind of talking to him and cheering him on, and then Roki, a couple days after the game, gives him candy from Lotte, the company that owns the Marines. So I really like the human side of the game there. The Czech team, obviously, they weren't expected to be Japan, kind of just there to have a great time. And they showed a lot of respect and earned the love of a lot of Japanese fans.
Yeah, it seems like Japan has fallen in love with Czech baseball.
Oh, yeah,
like
absolutely.
That connection has been so fun to see.
Yeah, absolutely. The Australia game, Yamamoto was lights out, just as Sasaki was the day before. Ohtani, in the first inning, bangs a hanging curveball right off the billboard of his own face. So that was my favorite moment there. That was probably the loudest the Tokyo Dome got all tournament from the games I went to. So those were my favorite moments from each game.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, that Willie Escala hit by pitch was it just looked brutal. Like I can't imagine the kind of pain off of that pitch, but it was really cool to see him give that candy afterwards and then take those pictures together. I think that was also the first time I realized how tall Roki Sasaki is. He's not a big dude. He's pretty lanky, but he's tall. So that was pretty cool. What were the games that you attended?
Yeah, so I ended up attending every single game at Tokyo Dome, apart from the last game between Korea and China, because that game didn't have meaning. And then it was 22-2. So I'm not really regretting missing that one. But I was able to go to 11 of the 12 games, I think, at Tokyo Dome. Best experience of my life.
Man, that's incredible. I don't think I realized you went to 11 of them. That's incredible. Do you have a favorite game that you went to?
Other than the Japan games, because that's a little unfair, I would say, honestly, this is a sneaky great game was Czech Republic versus China. Because they're playing for relegation. And China were winning in the ninth inning, and then you have that big come back three-run homer. His mother, I'm blanking on the player who hit it, but his mother was right kind of sitting behind me, and there's the famous shot of her kind of like crying. And it was a really back and forth game. It was a great game. Australia-Korea was also great, obviously. Cuba versus Australia in the quarterfinals. That was an amazing game. Also Yariel Rodriguez's final start, as it turns out, in Japan. So a lot of great storylines overall, and I'm really happy I was able to be a part of those games.
Yeah, you got to see a lot of history. This WBC was like, it's just jam packed with history. Like you said, like Australia over Korea was something that I had talked about multiple times. Is like, no one expected that. Like there was the slightest chance that Australia could maybe get an upset somewhere, but it was hard to find where, because Korea seemed like they were a whole tier above Australia. So the fact that Australia won, made it to the quarterfinals, that's the most successful team that they've ever had. Australia, maybe one of the more disappointing teams that Korea's ever had. Czech not having to requalify this next WBC, but then China getting relegated. So just in that pool, it was pretty incredible how many storylines there were. So in the quarterfinals, when Japan finally made it on, I mean, they didn't have an issue moving on to the quarterfinals, but they got to go up against Italy, and it was in the Tokyo Dome. You got to go to that game as well. What were some of your favorite moments from that game?
Yeah, so Ohtani getting the start in that game was huge, because it's an elimination game, regardless of it being only a quarterfinal. If you lose, you're out. So Kuriyama had stated since before the tournament that he's going to treat this quarterfinal, like there's no tomorrow, because there isn't if you lose. And the scoreline 9-3 would indicate that it wasn't particularly close, but it actually was, because Japan scored 3 in the bottom of the third. Kazuma Okamoto, had a nice home run that Tokyo Dome exploded. I would say that was the second loudest moment from the week at Tokyo Dome, other than the Ohtani home run off the billboard. Wow. But then in the 5th inning, Ohtani kind of ran into trouble, and he gave up 2 runs. There was a situation there where he brought in Hiromi Ito. If Italy had picked up a big hit, the game would have been tied. Maybe Italy could have even taken the lead. So it was close up until the middle innings, but then Japan quickly got some runs back. So that was good to see. But my personal favorite moment from that game would probably be that Munetaka Murakami finally, had a really hard hit double. Actually had 2 of them, I think, although one of them should have been caught by the outfielder. But either way, the fact that he was actually crushing the ball, it gave me hope, because Murakami looked so bad in pool play, and looked so bad prior to that as well. And he had just lost his cleanup spot. Masataka Yoshida moved into the cleanup spot in the quarterfinals, which, before the tournament, it was almost unthinkable that Murakami would lose his cleanup spot, because cleanup spot Yoban in Japan has a lot of symbolic meaning to it. It's like you're the best player. And so to remove Murakami from that spot, it's kind of like saying, we don't really trust you anymore. But then both Yoshida and Murakami had clutch moments in the semifinals and the finals. So I think it all worked out. And then after this Italy game, something that was funny was Ohtani was going to meet David Fletcher after the game to take that
I was going to say that.
Yeah. And Kuriyama was giving an interview in the stadium, and because Ohtani was going to take a picture with Fletcher, like Kuriyama, the manager, had to pause temporarily to allow for this to happen. And it's just kind of funny because, obviously Kuriyama was saying this in an interview after, but like he knows the fans want to see Ohtani more than they want to see him, even though he's the senior and he's the manager. So he's supposed to be, the top dog there. But yeah, that was really funny to see. And another thing, speaking of Fletcher, that I found kind of funny was that because there were the 2 Fletcher brothers, Dominic and David, when their names were announced before the game and Dominic was announced first, a lot of Japanese fans just started cheering a lot. And I don't think they realized that it's not that David Fletcher. So I found that to be kind of funny.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, something that I had no idea until I started following Japanese baseball like pretty seriously last year is how much Japanese fans love Ohtani's teammates. Or should I say how much they love Ohtani. And so because of that, they love his teammates.
Yeah.
Every time I'd post anything about David Fletcher or Patrick Sandoval, it was Fletch, or Sandy. Like everybody would just like, and I'd have to use the little Google Translate, but everybody fell in love with those players. So that was really cool to see him get to face off against both of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Fletcher, yeah, Sandoval, like you said, these guys are very popular in Japan. I wasn't even aware of this either because I'm not like that, a part of the Otani fandom. But yeah, like in the stadium, like lining up for the Italy game, like just behind me, eavesdropping, I can hear like 20 people being like, "Oh, we get to see Fletch." So yeah, they have a big fan base here.
So what I'm hearing is that you're not exactly a Shohei.
I love my Shoheis, but I'm not that much of a Shohei to where I'm gonna start liking all the other Angels players.
You're like a on the perimeter Shohei. You're not quite
Exactly.
in the center of it. Totally
Exactly.
understand that. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and go on to semifinals. Italy was a great game. Like you said, it was definitely closer than the 9-3 score would cause you to believe. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't like half asleep for a lot of that game because it was 3 a.m. here, but
Yeah.
I did love what I remember of it. So the semifinal game, they move on. They have a couple of days off. They fly over to Miami, which is nice that they had the later game because they had some more time to rest and to prepare
Mm-hmm.
for the game. So they faced off against probably the hottest team in the entire tournament in Mexico. No one expected them to make it to the semifinals, and yet they were on fire. They were playing incredibly. I said this in my last episode of my podcast. I think that even though Ohtani is the face of baseball and was the center of this tournament for 1 week, Randy Arozarena became the face of baseball. Like everybody just fell in love with him with his arms crossed. The only celebration that rivaled the prepper grinder was Randy's arms crossed.
Yep.
So that was one of the most historic games in WBC history, honestly. What do you consider like I don't know, where does this rank for you in Samurai Japan games?
Man, I think it's if it's not number one, it has to be pretty close because you could point to the Japan Korea game in 2009 where they won in extra innings and that was a final, so that was obviously huge. But
Yep.
they hadn't had a game quite like this. They've had comeback victories. I mean, in 2013, I believe it was, they almost got upset in the opening game against Brazil, and they came back and won. But that's like nothing to compared to this game with that electric atmosphere in Miami.
And
You
real quick with
mentioned,
that, that's
yeah,
so interesting because I remember seeing that. And the largest population of Japanese people in the world outside of Japan is in Brazil. So a
right.
ton of Japanese fans in Brazil. So the fact that they played and Brazil almost got the upset was pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's too bad Brazil weren't able to be in the tournament this time because, yeah, they do have quite a few Japanese Brazilians. But yeah, Randy Arozarena really, I appreciated actually the fact that he was kind of talking trash before the game. He said, when asked like, what do you expect from Roki Sasaki today? He said, I expect him to lose. And the reason I kind of liked that was because Japan were not really tested early on, right? And, as much as I love teams like the Czech Republic and China for, all the love they brought, Japan was being kind of put on a pedestal in these pool stages. It was more like these other players were like honored to play with Japan, whereas Mexico was here to beat them. They're talking trash, they're bantering, and it kind of really prepared Japan for what was to come with that epic game they played, and then in the finals, obviously. So yeah, as much as everyone else loved Randy Arozarena, I think most Japan fans, especially for that day, we really hated him because he was like a magnet, just catching every ball, especially with the bases loaded, just anything flown out to him. He obviously robbed that Kazuma Okamoto home run as well. So yeah, Randy was a tough player to play against.
Dude, it was ridiculous. I was in the stadium for that game and every single ball went to him. I think it was,
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact number. I'm going to have to fact check this afterwards. You may remember. It's like 15 or so runners left on base. And for Japan,
Yeah.
it was incredible how they were playing well. Japan was playing well in the game. Just nothing was landing. And like I said, Mexico was just hot. They were the Cinderella story, even though they shouldn't have been. Like they were strong coming into the tournament, but they were the Cinderella story in the sense that like they achieved so much more than what anybody expected them to. And I think that they're going to have a great future in the WBC. But that being said, yeah, this is the first time that Japan was challenged. They didn't have any close games, and they were all the way to the end going to lose this game, or at least had the opportunity to lose. They were down 3-0 until the seventh inning. So what was your feeling up to the seventh inning? What were you feeling for that game?
Yeah, so Roki Sasaki, very unlucky in this start. He didn't pitch bad at all. Really set the tone early when he, right after Randy said those things about him, he blew a 100-mile-per-hour fastball right past him. It struck him out. That was a great way to start the game. He wasn't bad by any means. Got into trouble obviously in the fourth there, and then it was a bloop and then a little single shot down the line when they were shifted over, which Japan usually doesn't do. So it got a lot of fans thinking, oh, why did you shift there when that would have been an out? And then Urias hits that home run. It was one hanging forkball, which Sasaki had said before the game, I know I need to watch out for this. So that was devastating. And when Rosario was catching all these balls, I was really thinking, well, I guess this is the end. Like Mexico is just destined to win it. The baseball gods are on Mexico's side. But when Masataka Yoshida hits that 3-run homer in the seventh inning and everyone explodes, at that point, I 100% in my heart thought Japan was going to win no matter what happened. So in the eighth and the ninth there, despite Japan being down again, I really thought Japan was going to win.
After the final, and I was, like I said, I was so blessed to be able to be there for the semis and the final. Yeah. After the final, I got to be on the field as you helped me with the translation, got to talk to Roki Sasaki about it, about what he's feeling. So awesome. I asked him, what was your favorite part of the entire WBC after he just won the WBC and he saw the most legendary at bat maybe ever? He still went back to the semis and talked about his favorite moment being that Masataka Yoshida 3-run home run.
Yeah, and when you watch the replay of that home run, you can see Roki jump out of the dugout and just slam his head, his hat on the ground. It's like he's throwing it like 102 miles per hour into the ground. It's just like, and apparently afterwards, Kosuke Fukudome was saying that Roki Sasaki was crying, like bawling his eyes out, tears of joy, tears of happiness, relief, whatever it is, because he thought, even though it wasn't his fault, he was feeling like, I just lost Japan to WBC, and Yoshida rewrote the script there. So, man, yeah, like the whole game was really good, but those last three innings, the late innings, 7th, 8th, and 9th, that was maybe the most legendary moments ever in WBC, maybe just professional baseball history for any Japanese fan, because I can't, the kind of roller coaster of emotions that myself and all these, every fan had, that was incredible. And even for a neutral, I would imagine it was very, exciting.
Oh yeah. I mean, coming into the tournament, these were two of my favorite teams. Like I talked about Mexico being the most underrated team in the WBC and how Japan was even underrated. They should be considered that top tier. So those were probably two of the fan bases that I interacted with most. So I was so torn. I wasn't rooting for anyone because I just love both of these teams so much. To see them face off in that kind of game, in that atmosphere, was unbelievable. And the crazy thing is about that Masataka Yoshida home run is, maybe it was, but there's a case to be made that it wasn't even the biggest hit of that game or in the history books for Samurai Japan, because going into the 9th inning, and I tweeted this, and I'm very proud of this tweet. I'm not proud of many of my tweets, but this one I was very proud of. Munetaka Murakami was coming up to bat. And as you mentioned, he has had a cold streak. Except for the last game, we got to see a couple really hard hits, gave us some hope. But before that, in the exhibition games, in the pool games, even at the end of the last NPB season, he was struggling. He did not look good. He was nothing close to that home run record masher that we're used to seeing. So when Murakami's walking up to the plate with 2 runners on, I was like, if there was ever a player, I tweeted this out. I was like, if there was ever a player that was due for a big moment, it would be right now. And then not a minute later, he knocks that double off the wall. 2 runners score. It was just chaos in the stadium. Everybody's screaming, both fan bases, for joy or sorrow. I got up with the other people in the press area. We were like sprinting to get to the press conference room to be able to hear from the players. And it was mayhem. It was one of the craziest moments I've ever experienced in person in a baseball game. What was it like for you to see that walk-off?
Yeah, that entire end of the game is kind of a blur for me, but man, like watching the replays now, you can kind of walk it back in slow motion. And the amazing thing is, as if we need more evidence to suggest why Ohtani is a unicorn.
Yeah.
He had said prior to that at bat, I'm gonna get on base. I'm gonna get on base. He said that apparently when, back in like July 1st, 2016, maybe, which was one of the first times that Ohtani, as an Nippon Ham fighter, led off the game as a hitter while pitching. So like a true two-way player. He told Kuriyama, "Oh, I'm just going to go up and hit a home run," and he did. He hit a leadoff home run that game. And so Kuriyama was talking about how Ohtani can basically do whatever he feels like doing, if he sets his mind to it. And he choked up on the bat, and then he shot that, Giovanni Gallegos double into the gap. And the intensity, the fire, he was like a lion, just roaring back at the dugout.
Yes,
gave everyone the energy they needed.
That was such a scene, seeing him blow up like that, spread out, like stick out his chest. That was crazy.
Yeah, never seen that kind of intensity from Ohtani before. I mean, he gets fired up a lot, but not that much. Like that was, and it's kind of, it's rare for Japanese players to kind of show that much emotion because traditionally you're not really supposed to. And so for Ohtani to do that, it got everybody fired up. But I think one moment that's a little bit underrated that came right after that is Masataka Yoshida, who had hit that 3-run homer earlier. He draws a walk, so that's huge. Obviously, he's being very patient. He's not trying to do too much. And then right after he walks, he points at Munetaka Murakami and just kind of stares at him like, "Okay, I've done my job. Ohtani's done his job. Now it's your turn, buddy." They get Ukyo Shuto to pinch run for
the Flash.
Yoshida. I'm really happy that Shuto got a chance to have his moment, because I was going to make a video about him before the tournament, but then I was like, okay, he's probably not going to have much of a role. He did.
We didn't even know if he was going to be on the team for a while.
Yeah. And he's, probably the fastest or the second fastest player in Japan. I know Sarah Langs was talking about his sprint speed from first to home, which was just absolutely insane. Just lightning speed, so flashy in that beautiful slide. But I'll say for Murakami there in that final at bat, I wasn't hopeful, but there was a part of me that was thinking he is going to come through. He has to come through. I didn't want to get my expectations too high, but I really felt like this is the moment for him. And I remember your tweet there about how, this would be the moment for him to come through. He did. And, I don't think 20 years from now, anyone's going to remember that he was having the worst tournament of his life up until that point, because he got the big moment. Now it's just about him resetting, and then how much he can use that game to pivot to the future. And then he hit that home run against USA. So
I completely agree. And that is a perfect segue into the final, because he hit that bomb. It was crazy. It was probably 30 feet, like 20 feet away from me. Cause I was over in the right field area, like the auxiliary press section. I wasn't important enough to be in the actual press box for those games. So they threw us out there, but it was cool to see that ball land really close. But for the final, and this is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. I'm not Japanese. I don't speak Japanese, so I don't understand all of the Japanese tweets and media out there. But from what I had seen, this was the matchup that everybody in Japan wanted.
Yep.
Everybody wanted to see USA, Japan. For years, we've wanted to see this, but especially this year with, of course, the two best players, Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani. So going into this game, I'll give a little bit of like background of what I saw.
Yeah.
When I got to the stadium, got there as early as I could. I think it was like 2 in the afternoon. The game started later in the evening, but we got there as early as they'd let us in. And I thought I was maybe like 5 to 10 minutes after they opened the gates, and the press box was already filled with Japanese media. It's like, the Japanese media is something else. They showed up to every single game. They love not only baseball, but specifically Ohtani. Like anytime I'd try to get close to Ohtani, and he would come out on the field, I would just have like 50 Japanese media members just flock past me. And they were the nicest people I ever met. But in those moments when he was on the field, they would shove me out of the way like there was no one else that mattered but Ohtani, because there was no one else that mattered but Ohtani in those moments. Yeah. So that was pretty cool, just to get to feel like get a feel of what it was like to be around Ohtani. And because he really is a unicorn, it was just different being around him. There was like a hush that would come over the media, but at the same time, like the screams that would amplify in the stadium anytime he'd walk on the field, whether it's BP or whatever, because of just like the respect and like the status that he has. And so seeing his BP before the game, before that final, was ridiculous. One of the craziest things I've ever experienced in person. I know he even, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he mentioned that he wanted to put on a show. And he was like, I need to show out for this BP, right?
Yeah. I watched a couple of his BPs at Tokyo Dome too. And he is like, he wants to put on a show every time, especially the very first time. He came back to Japan in Nagoya at the Chinichi Dragon Stadium with him and Nootbaar. So Nootbaar is right behind him getting ready to take BP, and Ohtani he's hitting these bombs to the third deck. And then I think Nootbaar kind of like shoved him a little bit, like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Like after watching that, like I can't possibly be as impressive as you. Man, Ohtani's BP is like, I've never seen anything like it. He just, at Tokyo Dome too, he would just hit like the billboard every time. It just doesn't make sense. Nobody else can do that except like Aaron Judge.
I got to know some of the Marlins beat reporters that are there for all the games, and they said, like, in person, they were like, I've never seen balls hit up there, like, by anyone, up the top deck, top rows, off the scoreboard. I got a video of that, which was awesome. It was something different. This is something I didn't even see until at the end of the night, just because Twitter was insane for those couple hours. And I was trying to get as much content out as I could, trying to tweet everything, take pictures of everything, and then also be off my phone at least sometimes to enjoy it. But something I didn't even see until after the game was Ohtani's pregame speech. And I don't understand Japanese, but I got to see some of the translations, and I couldn't help but compare. I guess that's not the right word. What's the word? I guess compare his speech to the words that Ichiro had in 2009. They had a very similar sentiment of, we are playing against Team USA. Both of them were this was in the final, but Ichiro got to play him earlier in the tournament. Both of them addressed the team, and they were like, this is all stars. We know that. We look up to these guys. Obviously, these are some of the best players in the world. But at the same time, like, for this game, we can't do that. We can't look at them as these like stars that are above us. We need to look I think Ichiro said we need to look down on them. And then Shohei Ohtani was like, we need to look at them as equals, because we can beat them and we can achieve this. So I couldn't help but like see the relationship between, like, that's the similar sentiment that both of them had, both of these stars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ohtani was saying, he singled out a couple players. He said, you look out in center field, you're going to see Mike Trout. You look out in right field, you're going to see Mookie Betts. You get to first base, Paul Goldschmidt's going to be right next to you. But for one day, you're not allowed to admire them, because if you admire them, psychologically, you're going to lose. And for Ohtani to say that, a guy who is the biggest superstar in the world, maybe of all time, it carries even more weight, because all these other players, obviously, with the exception of Kensuke Kondo, who was a teammate of Ohtani, they don't really know Ohtani on that much of a personal level, and Darvish knows him, obviously. But they obviously, when Ohtani first arrived, they were like, man, like this guy's like a god to me. How am I supposed to play alongside him? But Ohtani is so mellow. He was just another dude. And that's huge, because you don't want people to feel inferior to you. And I think Ohtani encapsulated that perfectly in that pregame, and Japan got off to an early lead in that second inning. So that's all they needed to hold on to the lead.
Yeah. And we can go ahead and get into the game, because first thing, I didn't expect Shota Imanaga to start. Everybody thought it was going to be Yu Darvish. And so having him on the mound was pretty cool. I'd never seen him pitch in person. And it allowed for the storyline of Darvish in the 8th, obviously Ohtani in the 9th. But he looked great. Obviously there was that big home run from the home run king, Trey Turner, who just absolutely lit it up the entire tournament. But that was like kind of one little blemish on a really stellar outing for Imanaga.
Yeah. A couple of interesting things for the Imanaga start, actually. So for one, Imanaga was talking about how he was trying to act stoic and like really confident, but he said in the bullpens he was having like one of his worst bullpens ever, and that he couldn't find the strike zone, and he was really nervous that he was just going to walk everybody. But then the very first pitch, he threw a strike right down the pipe, and that kind of gave him confidence to ease into the game a little bit. He did have a rough second inning, but I think he did his job. A 2-inning opener, that's what they needed from him. And then the other thing about this is that I think the reason Kuriyama decided to go to Imanaga is, one, Darvish wasn't all that great to begin with this tournament, but also he was mentioning in the quarterfinals when Ohtani kind of ran into trouble in the fifth inning, and he might have left him in there a couple batters too many. He was fatigued, as anybody would be if you do the things Ohtani's been doing this early in the calendar year. So Kuriyama said, I realized from that performance from Ohtani that I need to have a quick hook in the finals. So he's learning on the spot. He's adapting on the spot, Kuriyama, and he's saying, I determined I'm just going to have a full bullpen game, which is high risk, high reward, because it means you have one extra, two extra, three extra pitchers that might have a bad day and you might lose the game because of that. But it also gives them the best chance to win because you're not overextending any of these guys. So Shota Imanaga, I actually thought was an interesting pitcher to use in the finals to start, because one, it catches the U.S. off guard. Two, they've never seen him. He's not Darvish. All the U.S. hitters are familiar with Darvish for the last decade. Yeah. And actually Imanaga, despite being a lefty last season, even 2 years ago, he's better against righties than lefties in MPB. So I thought Imanaga was an interesting pitcher to use there. And then, they just went bullpen after that. They used a bunch of different pitchers.
Yeah, they did. It was incredible. I wanted to, so I was looking at the score, like the box score, and I didn't even realize this until afterwards either, but 4 of the 5 runs that were scored were all off of solo home runs for both teams. So it was electric the entire time. Every hit seemed like it was either, it was a strikeout, a ground out, or a home run. But there was 4: Trey Turner, Munetaka Murakami, Kazuma Okamoto, and Kyle Schwarber. Was there one that like sticks out to you as the one that like, I guess you'll remember most, whether it's for making like the positive or the negative, if it was a USA home run?
Yeah. So the Murakami one just felt good because, he finally got the monkey off his back in the Mexico game, obviously with that walk-off, and then he hits that bomb against USA. So that was big. The Schwarber one in the 8th inning, I must say, like, I saw that coming from a mile away. Just Darvish, Schwarber was just pounding all those foul balls. Former teammate on the Chicago Cubs, I believe. Darvish from the intangibles did so much for Samurai Japan. Everyone will say that he was like secretly the MVP of this tournament for how much he helped the younger players. He was the one who made the game plan against Team USA. This came along with Kuriyama. But his play himself, because he didn't get, many innings to ramp up for the tournament, he was struggling. So I would have liked to see Yuki Utagawa there in the 8th inning, but so that Schwarber home run against Darvish is going to stick to me. And it probably, Darvish is probably going to feel really bad about that for a while too, but Japan won the game, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, doesn't matter. They won. That Schwarber home run, you're right. He was crushing every ball. I mean, every pitch that he threw was crushed for almost a home run, but just foul. Yeah. So you could see that from a mile away, but it didn't matter because they won. Real quick, I just wanted to touch on the Okamoto home run. That was just, his performance was incredible in this WBC because we didn't expect, you and I talked about this. We made all these mock lineups, these dream teams, and these projected lineups. We always had Hotaka Yamakawa at first base or why am I blanking on his name?
Shugo
Maki, my favorite player. It was always going to be one of those two at first base. So I did not at all expect him to catch fire in the WBC, but in a tournament setting, that's what it is. Like, you just play the guys that are the best at the moment. So that was pretty incredible to see him get that home run and to kind of make his name known in Samurai Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Randy Arozarena Arena hadn't robbed that, that home run from him in the semifinals, he would have had 3 straight games with a home run because he hit one in the quarterfinals too. And yeah, Okamoto we didn't really know if he was going to be on the team to begin with. He wasn't somebody who I personally would have put on Samurai Japan, just because he doesn't really, I didn't think he offered anything that Yamakawa doesn't. But Okamoto actually has versatility. He can play left field, and he was practicing left field prior to the tournament. And when Seiya Suzuki went down, I was immediately like, okay, maybe Okamoto is going to have a role, especially because he's been hot in the exhibition games. But he ended up basically just filling in at first base. He plays third base typically for the Yomiuri Giants. So, not that first base is difficult to play, but he's playing a little bit out of position, not a position he's played in a couple of years. And he has been able to ride that hot streak into the MPB season, because in 11 games so far, he is hitting 381. So he is really on fire. And yeah, I mean, he's a guy who has 5 straight seasons with 30 plus home runs in Japan. So he is one of the more consistent power hitters that we have here. And I'm really happy for him. He was able to put it on display for the world.
I love it. I was happy for him. Let's talk about the at-bat. The last inning, the one that everybody's going to remember. When did you realize that Ohtani was going to be able to come in to close?
Yeah, so before the game, they were mentioning, he can throw 1 inning. So I thought the plan would be, probably have Ohtani close, but we didn't really know, because he's like running back and forth between the dugout and the bullpen since like the 6th inning. So it was like, maybe they want to use him earlier.
Yeah.
And Taisei was saying after the game that he didn't know if he was going to pitch the 7th or the 9th, meaning, maybe in a higher leverage situation, Ohtani was going to come in earlier, and then they would have had Darvish and Taisei to close it. Instead, Taisei came in the 7th inning. Darvish throws the 8th, and then Ohtani throws the 9th. Obviously, before that inning even starts, it's already like, well, Trout is in the hole, so looks like it might end up being that way. But then when McNeil walked, I was like, oh no, now the whole thing's ruined. But then Mookie Betts hits into a double play. It's just destiny.
That one was soul crushing for me as a US fan. I was so sad when he grounded out into that double play. But yeah, so the 9th inning, well, even before that, when Ohtani was running back and forth, it was so funny and weird and awesome, and like gave me chills, because it's like, man, there's no one that does this. No one runs back and forth between the bullpen and the dugout, because they're doing both things on the team. So there's just like, there's nothing that we haven't already said about Ohtani. Like he's the best. So that was awesome. But the 9th inning, it was that McNeil walk, but then the Mookie Betts ground out into the double play. And then Shohei Ohtani's teammate comes up, Mike Trout, in what is, if not the best at-bat of all time, one of the most historic and one of the most impactful, I would say, at-bats in baseball history. What were you doing? Like, where were you, and what were you thinking?
Yeah, so I was sitting the whole game, but I had to stand up for this one, obviously, in front of my television. It was really tough for me to watch. Well, it was a little bit harder to watch the Betts at-bat, actually, because there was a guy on base and he could have flipped the score with one swing. But for Trout, Ohtani, I'm kind of covering one eye, trying to not panic too much. But then as soon as Ohtani blew a fastball by him, I'm thinking, okay, Ohtani actually, he might have this in the bag. And I know he was saying in the post game on MLB Network that he kind of realized that Trout was on his sweeper. So he kind of pounded him with fastballs a little bit, but then finally puts him away with maybe like one of the most beautiful sweepers ever. It's like painted. I know the StatCast stuff for that was insane. The horizontal break. I mean, wow. What? And then the way Ohtani just, explodes, throws his cap, everyone runs on the field. It was a perfect moment. And as you said, at the very beginning in part one, it really mirrored Darvish in 2009, because Darvish also struck out the final batter with a slider outside.
I will never forget that last pitch. It was, that at bat, I could have seen it go either way. Now looking back to it, it's easy to say like, oh, it's destiny. Like Japan was the team that was supposed to win the entire time. They've played perfectly this whole tournament. Like there's no way that they could lose this. But in the moment, I was like, there's a 50-50 chance that either Trout strikes out or hits a bomb like
Yep.
into the seats in left field. So I had no idea what was going to happen after that. He blew that heater past him. I was like, oh, this is Ohtani's feeling it. And he's one of the most clutch players of all time too. Like, not only does he do both so well
Yep.
in the clutch, like no one comes through like Ohtani. So seeing him throw his hat, jump up, jump into the arms of all his players. I think it was the throwing of the hat for me, the hat and the glove. When he threw those two things, I'm never going to forget that visual in my head, because we've never seen that from Ohtani. And maybe we never will again. I mean, he could win the WBC again or the World Series, but I don't know if it's going to compare to that first time that he got to win it and put the entire team on his back. It was one of the coolest moments I've ever experienced.
Yeah, because Ohtani, his only other taste of winning is 2016, the Japan series with the Nippon Ham Fighters. And obviously he was fired up, but not like that. Like, this is a whole different level. And yeah, just on the point of to go off the Nippon Ham Fighters, it is so cool to see Darvish pitch the 8th inning and then Ohtani close it in the 9th, and for them to have that little passing of the baton. Even though Darvish wasn't that great, because Darvish closed the 2009 WBC when Ohtani was in junior high. And then Darvish leaves the Fighters in 2011 to join the Texas Rangers. Kuriyama becomes the manager of the Fighters that very next year. He drafts Ohtani, even though Ohtani had declared he's going to go to the US from straight out of high school. He convinces him, please stay in Japan for a couple of years and we'll turn you into a two-way star. Ohtani takes on Darvish's number 11, the jersey number, and then in the 2023 WBC, it comes all full circle. It's like, I know Kuriyama was saying he kind of had this narrative written already from August. He wanted it to kind of play out this way, which can be dangerous if you're trying to script out a storybook ending, but somehow it all worked out.
It was magical. It was a storybook ending, that's for sure. It was. Man, I was upset that USA lost for maybe a minute, but I was so happy for Japan. It was just meant to be. What has it been like after the WBC? What was the reaction in Japan, whether it's in media or just like fans, people that you've talked to? Like, what has been the reaction that you've seen around this team?
Yeah, so for Japan time, they won the game at like 11:30 a.m. So that whole rest of the day was just like, everyone was just so happy on cloud nine. Just one day later, hundreds were awaiting them at Narita International Airport to welcome them home. Kuriyama has done a lot of interviews and kind of appeared on variety shows. So people have been able to pick his brain a little bit, but players have to transition right into the NPB season. So we haven't really been able to hear too much from them. But Ohtani striking out Trout, that is still played on every like news broadcast media every single night. I see that highlight so many times throughout the day. I never get tired of it, but I'm sure a lot of other people do. But yeah, the WBC's impact has been huge. I mean, I had told you this off the camera before, but like my aunt, who was never into baseball once in her life, is just like, oh, I love Roki Sasaki, I love Ohtani, I love Masataka Yoshida, these players who have been able to inspire the whole country. And Japan has always had a passionate baseball fan base, but getting casual fans to buy in, it puts baseball on a whole new level. The young talent right now is so insane. We might have another baseball boom in Japan when there's already so much young talent. So so much to be excited about.
So with manager Kuriyama as well, this was like, I mean, if not, I mean, this was one of the most legendary like retirements ever. He wins the WBC, and immediately, like right following the game, the final, he's like, I'm done. I'm on the top. I'm done. I'm retiring. How was that? Like, how did that go about?
Yeah, so Kuriyama was basically saying, according to interviews now, that he was planning to retire anyway, even if they won or lost. But yeah, for him to get all these superstars together, kind of put them on an equal level, like we were talking about, nobody's superior to anybody else. He gets everybody to buy in, even people that have a reduced role on the team. He was able to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't give you playing time, but this is what I think is best for the team right now. He's very much a player's manager. He has great relationships with the players. He's known Ohtani for a long time. So I can't think of a better manager in Samurai Japan history. Even, previously they had like Sadaharu O and Tatsunori Hara. Sadaharu O is the best Japanese player of all time. But it's just like the buy-in that Kuriyama got from his players this time was on a different level. And he was also just much more of a, recruiting Nootbaar, getting all the other MLB superstars. He did things that other managers couldn't do. So I am hopeful for the future for whoever's going to be the next manager of Japan, but it's going to be tough to top Kuriyama. He's such a lovable person too. It's just everything about him was so nice. I knew about him for a long time from when he was the Fighters manager, but never thought of him, in such a positive light until now. I just always thought he was okay. He's a pretty good manager, but this really kind of showed, what Kuriyama's really made of.
Oh yeah, that cemented him for sure in Samurai Japan history as world champions. And we kind of talked about this as well before, but I would say that more eyes are on Japanese baseball now because of the WBC than maybe ever before in the West. Where do you think Japanese baseball goes from here, whether it's in NPB or abroad? Like, what is the next step for Japanese baseball?
Yeah, so the one unfortunate thing about NPB is that they're not really committed to trying to get foreigners to buy into the product. They make their viewership very difficult. Pacific League TV makes it pretty easy, but the Central League has no interest in getting overseas viewers. So that makes it really tough for fans outside of Japan to watch NPB. But I hope we begin to see some changes in that. I know interest is obviously, like you said, at an all-time high. And yeah, the young talent in Japan is, I've never seen anything like this. There's been superstars before, but I'm seeing 21, 22-year-olds every day now showing signs that they're going to be the next big superstar. The 2026 WBC might even be better than the 2023 WBC team that won it all. It just seems
it's
like
basically going to be the same team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like everything's
so
going
young.
in the right direction. People are getting better. There's new young players coming through. My hope is that we see, MPB kind of be respected as a major league. Doesn't mean that it's better than MLB, because that's what everybody seems to think I'm saying whenever I say that MPB deserves respect as a true major league. Being a major league doesn't mean you're the same as Major League Baseball, but I really hope people gain an interest in MPB. KBO, same thing applies. These are really good leagues around the world. Just because a player is really good doesn't mean he has to immediately leave and go to MLB. Let him have the light shine on him in Japan for a little bit in front of his domestic fans. And eventually, when the time is right, they will be let go into the wild and they can go to MLB. But I just hope that this tournament, not that it's not an MLB versus NPB thing. It's an MLB and NPB thing. It's both leagues should be enjoyed in tandem.
Yeah, my hope, I guess you could say dream, eventually someday is not only for us to see more Japanese players move to MLB, but then also American players, more American players move to NPB, KBO, CPBL. I just think it'd be so much fun to see it even more diverse and more intertwined, this like whole baseball world. Last thing, we've covered it all, but 10, 20, 30 years from now, what are the biggest moments or storylines, maybe like the top one or two, that you hope will be remembered when we look back on Samurai Japan in 2023?
Yeah, that's a really tough one because there's so many great moments. I think the two obvious ones would be Murakami's walk-off against Mexico and then Ohtani striking out Trout. Those would be the two obvious ones, but again, there's so many other great moments. I don't want Yoshida's 3-run homer in the 7th inning against Mexico to be forgotten, because we wouldn't have been in that situation for Murakami to get the walk-off if he didn't deliver there. And Yoshida had a monster tournament. Kazuma Okamoto was a hero this tournament. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, I've barely even mentioned throughout this broadcast. He was huge. I know he ended up blowing the game in the 8th inning against Mexico there, but playing a follower role to Roki Sasaki in the semifinals. That was Japan's number 1 and number 2 going back to back. They were going all hands on deck against Mexico, and they were able to pull out the victory. So there is an iconic picture from when they were in Osaka just a few days before the WBC started, of the entire team, the first time all 30 members came together, plus Ippei. They have a picture eating dinner together. I think that's going to be like the most iconic image ever, like just the boys at dinner before they become world champions. Can I ask you one question, Shawn?
Yeah, absolutely.
Something I'm curious about, from the WBC, who was one player on Japan that you didn't know much about before, that because of the WBC you really fell in love with, or you learned more about, or you thought this guy's really good?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm trying to think back before the tournament. We knew the names. We knew the big ones. We knew Munetaka Murakami and Roki Sasaki. We knew Yoshinobu Yamamoto. We knew Masataka Yoshida because he's coming over to MLB. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani. I think the name. That's so tough. There's a couple. I'm trying to narrow it down to one because I think that Yuki Utagawa was awesome to see. But you and I talked about it a little bit before, so maybe my eye was like a little bit more pinned into his performance because I wanted to see how he would do. I think Shosei Togo was really cool to see as well. I think for me, this is very specific to my experience because I got to interview him after the game as well.
Right.
But one of my favorite players in Japan after this WBC and all throughout the WBC, but just being able to see him like interact with the rest of the team, his celebrations, but then just like he's super young. Shugo Maki, he is so much fun. And not only can he play both first and second, and was a great bat throughout the WBC, but I think it was just the fact that, like, I don't know, the role that he played in the dugout at that age. What is he, 23? 24?
24, yep.
24. So he's really young. He'll be there for the next WBC, but he's so funny. He's so much fun. Like I said, I got to interview him after the game. He was super excited to win the WBC, but because of that, he was like willing to speak a couple words in English, which I was so happy about. He was so kind, so much fun to be around. But I'd probably say him because he's just so young. Like, he's one of the, I would say, maybe you'd probably agree with me, he's probably the best bat in the lineup that no one's talking about, because you got all those guys that I mentioned, and he's probably the next best bet after that. So I'm really excited to see what his future is in NPB, and if he ever decides to come over to Major League Baseball. Not that he has to, like you said, but I think that he's very underrated and still super young. So we'll see him for multiple WBCs.
Yeah, Shugo Maki, he was just drafted, 2 years ago. So in his first 2 NPB seasons, 900 OPS between those 2 years. For the first half of 2022, it really seemed like Maki might be one of the best overall hitters in Japan, and I think he still can be. Had a bit of a slow second half, but hit a home run off Roki Sasaki opposite field in June of last year, and that really kind of cemented for me, like, wow, I think Maki's the real deal. I think this guy has MVP potential. And I had him on my list. I had a thread before the tournament of like 6 or 7 guys, not just from Japan, but also in Cuba, that play in NPB that you should have your eye on, that you might not have heard of. And Maki was on that list. A little bit disappointed he didn't get the start in the final 2 games. They gave it to Tetsudo Yamada, the veteran, who's also beloved. That's fine. Yamada's a bit more sure-handed defensively, but Maki had 2 big home runs throughout the tournament.
He did three hits, right?
Had
and
one against
2 of
China.
them were home runs.
Yes. Yeah. Pinch hitting for Shohei Ohtani against Czech Republic, he had a home run. So that's fun. Yeah. And like you said, he's one of the best personalities, super funny guy. I really liked your interview with him. Kind of reminded me, he's almost, Munenori Kawasaki-esque. He's trying his best, I've seen him on TV programs in Japan before. He's just a really funny guy. I love Maki, and I hope he has a great season this year. And I think a lot of unsung heroes throughout this tournament for Japan. In the bullpen alone, you have plenty of names that I think a lot of people were unfamiliar with. I do want to point to Hiroto Takahashi, who is 20. He was the youngest player on the team. Starter last year for the Chunichi Dragons. Pitched in relief this tournament. In the finals, there pitched the 5th inning. Struck out a couple of US's best batters. I mean, his stuff is absolutely nuts. Kensuke Kondo did an amazing job filling in for Seiya Suzuki. Kondo's one of the best players in Japan, but he was right there with Nootbaar, Ohtani, Murakami, Yoshida. Kensuke Kondo was just sandwiched in between them, and I know a lot of people outside of Japan weren't familiar with Kondo. So, a lot of amazing players to celebrate from this tournament. What a ride!
We'll have plenty of time to do a podcast episode on every single one of them. We'll do an individual podcast for each individual player. This team was incredible, man. It was historic. And I loved every second of getting to follow this team. Thank you for all of your help covering all Japanese baseball, but specifically Samurai Japan leading up to the WBC. You were the biggest help for me. What a ride. Congratulations. Is there anything else that you wanted to shout out or plug before we log off of this long episode?
Not really. I mean, amazing tournament. Time to move on, I guess, to the season. It's already started in MPB and MLB. It's hard to get past something this amazing, but for the players especially, they do have to kind of put themselves in a new headspace. Maybe in the off season again, we can reminisce about this. But thank you for everything you do, Shawn. You've been instrumental in spreading the game. That interview you had with John Morosi was like, the icing on the cake. You've really made it, and it's been amazing to see your fan base, your follower count just skyrocket over the years, because there is a market for it. There's a interest in it. People want international baseball news. People love the WBC. It just hasn't been a space for it in the past, and I think you have really opened the door to that. So I'm happy to continue to do my best to spread Japanese baseball to the English speaking world. And let's collab more in the future.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate your kind words, and we absolutely will. We'll do some more collabs for sure in the future. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This was super long, but it was a blast. Thank you for coming on. Everybody go follow Yakyu Cosmopolitan on Twitter and YouTube, even as an Instagram. But yeah, this has been great. Feel free to reach out if you ever need anything, man. If you're listening, thank you. If you've made it this far, this has been awesome. But yeah, if you're listening to this, have a great night or a great morning whenever you are listening to this. Have a great rest of your day. I know it's morning over there, and it's night over here, but it's great talking to you, man.
Have a good night, Shawn. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, man. See ya.
Bye.